Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just wrapped up talking some NFL, did Super Bowl, did a little bit of NFL draft and the Caleb Williams sweepstake. Now we are going to be shifting gears to the NBA as the trade deadline is approaching. It is set to be on Thursday, February 8th. So as we sort of close in here, it hasn't been super eventful up to this point. You have Pascal Siakam being traded, and you have OG Anunoby being traded. So the Raptors specifically have gotten involved, but other than that, not all too much. And it seems like this could be a little bit of a quieter trade deadline, but I do think that despite maybe the lack of superstar talent, and it's always going to be hard to follow a trade deadline like last year where Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are traded in the same week. But we could still see, I think, some significant moves coming from some of these fringe teams that could be on the cusp of stronger contention. I think that this is a very good deadline as far as role players, which again, I know doesn't catch the eye necessarily as much as some of these other star players such as last year. I mean, last year was just a different level where, again, I don't like how the NBA trade deadline comes right before the Super Bowl. It's a lot of overlapping. I think that working sort of in sports media too, it is better when it's more spread out. But last year was crazy where Kevin Durant ends up getting traded to the Suns, and it was Super Bowl week, and all the national media was talking about was the NBA and Kevin Durant's trade and everything that came with that. So not going to be quite that level of superstar movement, but I do think that there are a couple teams that could really upgrade, and I think that we could see some significant role guys sort of changing teams. As far as teams that I think should buy this trade deadline, I have talked about it on the show in the past. I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder are in need of some physicality, some size, some strength, some height maybe. Chet Holmgren is having a very good rookie season for them, and I think that he has been an incredible addition as sort of why they've taken the lead that they have this season. They had a lot of the same personnel last year. I think that SGA has even gotten better, even though he was the most improved player last season. I think that Jalen Williams, J-Dub, as opposed to J-Will, the other Jalen Williams, J-Dub has really taken a step as well as far as his efficiency. I just love watching that team. I think that they're deep. I think they have a ton of guys that can help contribute, but they don't necessarily have the size. And we saw it last year when they made the play-in tournament. They weren't even giving center minutes in these play-in tournament games where they actually had a chance to make the playoffs. Now they have Chet, which is a very great addition. He can stretch the floor for them. He's a good interior defender. He gives them a lot of what they need. But it's a lot to ask one guy who, it was sort of a freak injury that he suffered before the season even started last year, but someone who missed his entire first season and now is coming in and is being asked to be the sole big man that you guys are putting out there. Now, the other Jalen Williams, J-Will, stick with me. He has been getting some more minutes, but he's still not necessarily a high-level contributor. I don't think that him playing playoff minutes necessarily is a great sign for the Thunder going forward. I think they could definitely make an upgrade at that position, and the level of how much you want to upgrade is sort of in the hands of them. The two names that I've really sort of seen be the fit are some combination of either Nick Claxton, who's on an expiring contract with the Nets, who have been very bad, so they can make a move. It's a matter of, are you going to want to pay him after this year? They're going to have a lot of guys to pay in the next few seasons. Or even a Daniel Gafford from the Wizards, who you could probably get with all of the draft capital they have. They could get either one of these guys, and I think that it would be pretty seamless for them. Now, if I'm a Thunder fan, I'm probably somewhere in online in the trade machine trying to figure out a way to get one of the Cleveland Cavaliers big men. I think that Jared Allen is somebody that I thought would have been a really good fit for them for a lot of this year, but the Cavs have really picked themselves up, and because of that, I think that it's going to be hard to get the Cavs to move off of them, because let's see here, the Cavs are currently, I think, the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, so getting them to move off of a guy like Jared Allen is probably tough at this point, although I think that there is a little bit of redundancy when that team is fully healthy as far as Mitchell and Garland and Allen and Mobley. So again, a little bit of a pipe dream there. But I think that Chet is somebody who could easily slide to a 4 position if you're going with a double big lineup, or if you just want a bench guy like Gafford to come in and just eat some minutes, be some size, provide some physicality. I don't know if Gafford is quite big enough. I would have liked Claxton more in that role. But when they go up against these big teams that they're going to see in the playoffs, specifically Jokic, I think, and there have been some very good games between the Nuggets and the Thunder this regular season. I just feel like he takes it to another level when you get to the playoffs. And this is a Thunder team that, yes, they have the youth, they have the draft capital for the future, but if there is a chance to sort of take a stab at contention this season, overlooking it may be a mistake, because you never know when these opportunities are going to come up. And it seems like, yes, the West is very deep, but they could potentially have a real shot at contention. The other team that I think should definitely be looking to make moves is the Dallas Mavericks. Mavs are currently 26-23 and the 8th seed in the Western Conference. This is a team that I was not buying into coming into the year. I thought that defensively they really didn't have any sort of perimeter defenders, and they went out and they signed a Grant Williams to a contract who's a solid defender, but I didn't think that they were necessarily all that nuanced. I didn't know who was going to start at the 3, and they've had guys step up and be very impactful for them there, between Derrick Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway, maybe not the defense, but he's been providing that 6-man scoring. He is in contention for the 6th Man of the Year award. They've had Josh Green, one of their young players, first-round pick a couple years ago. He's been really sort of turning himself around and being more of a contributor, especially as of late. Not necessarily a wing, but Dante Exum's having a little bit of a bounce-back year for himself. And then I thought that the other thing was Derek Lively was a rookie they selected in the top 10. He was really their main center, and I thought that that was going to be a little bit of an issue as far as, again, contending in this Western Conference, that a lot of these top teams have tons of size. Derek Lively's been really good for them. And again, in a playoff series against Jokic, I think that there's a very good chance of getting exposed. But he's done a lot for this Mavs team this year, and I think that he's only getting better as the year goes on. He's a great energy guy. He's great in the paint on both ends. He's a rebounder on both ends. He's been really good for them. So I like all of that, but I do think that they're still a wing short, and there are a couple guys that they've potentially been linked to. Dorian Finney-Smith, one of the guys they actually traded to the Nets last year to get Kyrie Irving. And Jeremy Grant's another one that very expensive, so I'm not sure if having him, Kyrie, and Luka all on the books is necessarily a great thing long term. But as far as competing this year, I think that it would absolutely make them better, and I think that they are still a little bit in this position of needing to prove themselves to Luka Doncic that he should want to stay long term. And bringing in Kyrie was great. Kyrie seems more bought in than he has been in any of his previous destinations. We'll see how long that lasts, because you never really know with Kyrie, but they seem to be happy right now, and I think that they have an opportunity here to potentially go get a wing guy from one of these worst teams and make an upgrade. And I don't think that anybody really wants to face Kyrie and Luka offensively in a playoff series. Is that enough to win them 4 straight rounds? I don't know. But if you go out and you add a Jeremy Grant to the picture and you can sort of get your defense more in shape, I mean, they've had another team that, like I mentioned, I wasn't big on them coming into the year, but now that they sort of have established a little bit more of a hierarchy in terms of who their go-to guys are on offense and what kind of roles, like Maxi Kleba has come off the bench this year and I think is much better in that role as an energy guy. The defensive presence is actually pretty solid when he's not being asked to play 30 minutes a game and guard the opposing team's best big man. I think that they've sort of worked themselves into a pretty decent situation here. Now, teams that I think should sell, I do want to note that this is also a little bit of a weird trade deadline because of the fact that there's not tons of superstar talent in the upcoming NBA draft. I think that we talked about this a little bit last week. There's a lot of good potential role players with them in that lottery place, a lot of guys that can contribute to teams, but nobody that's going to fully elevate your franchise and be the next guy. I think that it is an important thing to note because you shouldn't necessarily be just trying to sell low for the sake of selling low and making your team worse, because it's just not necessarily an option like that. You still want to maximize the talent or maximize the asset, I should say, of these guys that they'd be trading. But getting into this list of teams that I do think should be selling off some, the Chicago Bulls have been stuck in this place of mediocrity for a handful of years now. They are currently the 9 seed with a 23-27 record. They've had some high moments, a nice emergence of Kobe White as one of a real guys for them. I think that he should very strongly be in consideration for the Most Improved Player award, but they just found out that Zach LaVine has to get surgery on his foot, so he's going to be out for the rest of the season. He was somebody that was in a lot of trade talks, and now that they're not going to get anything for him, you're probably not going to be anything in the playoffs. You should try and make this season be worth something in some sense, because what is another play-in tournament and not making the actual playoffs really doing for you? They've made the playoffs just once since 2018, so it's sort of tough to just justify trying to stick in that mediocrity range, because this isn't baseball or something where, yes, the Miami Heat did obviously just make the finals as an 8 seed last year, but that's not what we see. It's typically the best teams in basketball are the teams that go on to, make these real finals runs. And I don't think that anybody would really in their right mind argue that the Chicago Bulls are one of the best teams in the NBA. So that leaves DeMar DeRozan, somebody who I think could definitely be a contributor somewhere else. He has the reputation behind him. He has a little bit of a contract behind him as well, but he could definitely go and contribute somewhere. But I think the more intriguing asset actually that they have is Alex Caruso, who has been great for them as a defensive enforcer. He's just the perfect plug-and-play guy. I think every team could benefit from having Alex Caruso. DeRozan's great. It's just a lot of him in crunch time, and this is also the Chicago Bulls, who don't really have all that other talent, but he can be a little bit of a void, I feel like, at times. He's taken steps with playmaking, but I feel like down the stretch of games, it's a lot of him. Would he be willing to sort of buy into giving the ball up more in other places? Who knows? But I think Caruso is somebody on that sort of a contract that can really make a difference on another team. I've been saying as a Celtics fan, the last thing I want is for him to go to Milwaukee. I think that would make that he would be the perfect guy for them, who they already have their offensive identity. You're not really asking for them to, for Caruso that is, if you're bringing it in, you're not asking him to revamp your offense. You want a point of attack defender on the perimeter. He's one of the best shot blockers in the league. Like, actually, if you look at the statistics, and as a guard, he's just so valuable from that defensive end. So I think that he would be huge. for the Bucks. Hopefully they don't have the assets to get him, but Caruso would be somebody, if I'm a contending team, I'm at least making calls about. The Detroit Pistons, they have Bojan Bogdanovic. I think that he's someone that, again, could be a little bit underrated, but a real contributing piece. I've loved the idea of the fit of him on the Lakers. He has size. He can shoot the ball. He can be, again, at least offensively, a little bit of a plug-and-play guy. And the Pistons are in this weird spot where they've been sort of flirting with the idea of trying to make more contention moves, and not contention moves necessarily, but moves that would make them better today. They are supposedly possibly in on DeJounte Murray, and they made a move earlier a couple weeks ago, moving on from a young asset in Marvin Bagley, who may be a little bit of a not great contract, but he's looked pretty solid in Washington since then. But they bring in Mike Muscala and Danilo Gallinari to try and just help them win a little bit more. And I think they should be looking to sell, specifically Bogdanovic. I think that they can get assets. And the Pistons are in a position right now where I think they already do have a lot of the cornerstones. I think that Cade Cunningham is going to be a great player. I think he is a very good player now. I don't think that he necessarily gets the credit he deserves because of how bad the Pistons are. And Jaden Ivey, although sometimes late in games he can be a little erratic, and that Pistons team as a whole can be very prone to turnovers, but I think that this is a perfect type of draft for them where it is more role player based. And I think that they should, if you sell off a couple games by trading Bogdanovic, get yourself better draft position. Again, it's not worth a full tank for, but you can put yourself in a better position to get sort of the cream of the crop, at least, of the role players. Now, we're going to have to take this break, but final thoughts would be on DeJounte Murray and the Atlanta Hawks. They're in a very strange position here with Murray coming up on an expiring contract, and this has not played out the way they were hoping to when they traded 3 first-round picks and a pick swap for Murray a couple seasons ago. So that's what sort of makes this interesting, is he's on that expiring deal. You can't get nothing for him after giving up all the assets that you did. So you want to either try and lock him down or get something for him. But again, when it comes back to the price that they paid to get him in the first place, if you sell him off for a lot less, that's also admitting as a front office that you screwed up and you are getting less for it in return. That's how people lose jobs. So I think they're in a very interesting limbo situation here. And I would probably expect Murray to be traded, but his value is nowhere near the level, not even just contract-based, play-wise, the defense we've seen fall, and he's just not quite as highly touted as he was when he was initially being traded. So very interesting position that the Hawks are in. Definitely one that I feel like we could be talking about later this week if they do decide to move him. But I guess we'll just have to see as that comes. So we're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be moving into some baseball and the Boston Red Sox, who have had a pretty uneventful offseason, you could say. So stick with us. We'll be right back.